In the meantime, the Southern Kaduna People's Union, SOKAPU, is protesting the continued detention of Luka Biniyat, a journalist and spokesman of the union. The union is asking the federal government to prevail on the Kaduna state government to release the journalist. He was arrested on November 4th. According to police, the arrest is in response to a complaint by Samuel Arunwa, the state's commissioner for internal security and home affairs, over a report that Biniyat had published in the Epoch Times, US-based news outlet.
We have come here to tell you that Luka has once again been arrested and detained for over 5 weeks now without granting him bail, in gross violation of his basic human and constitutional rights. We are here calling on the government authorities in Kaduna State that are responsible for his continuous detention without trial to allow the courts to do their work and stop the persecution. We also call on the attention of the media practitioners, the civil society, and international community to be on notice that free speech and the press freedom is under siege in Kaduna State.
I've been going through a lot psychologically. If you look at me, you know that I am not my normal self. People that know me will know that I'm not my normal self. Because every night I don't sleep. I always pray for him. I imagine a lot of things in my head in the night. And when I go there to visit him and he comes out, that is when I have a little peace. I want his freedom. Yes. I want him to spend this Christmas with his children and I.
Journalists have become complicit. I'm using the word complicit as the operating word in violation of rights of other journalists. Complicity happens in several ways. Some I think are direct, some I think are indirect. Some, in their own case, I think is mostly indirect. They are complicit by their own criminal silence. And it doesn't apply to the FCT alone, it applies to the National Union of Journalists nationally. And they should be worried.
Well, to discuss the issues of rights violations as well as the outcome of that NOI survey, we're now being joined by human rights lawyer and Arise analyst, Barrister Frank Tietie. Barrister Tietie, thank you so much for coming on the program tonight. Well, we'll come to Biniyat's situation, which is quite sad. It's almost like an irregular occurrence, you know, where journalists have become endangered species. But let's talk about this NOIpolls. One would have thought that, especially looking at the fallout of the End SARS protest that grounded the Nigerian economy last year, would have seen some sort of improvement in terms of the Nigerian police and how they handle our rights as citizens that they're supposed to protect. But obviously that hasn't changed.
Oh yes, you know, the essence of having this kind of accurate polling by which NOIpolls has done is to avoid issues that have to do with guesswork. It's important that a level of certainty is reached when talking about human rights rather than just making sweeping statements. Well, yes, there has been the assumption that the police has been more responsible for human rights violation, but it's different when you now have clear-cut data talking about the police actually continually for a long time and presently being the principal rights violator in Nigeria, human rights violator in Nigeria. And if you look at the polls, it also talked about government officials. So if you add the percentage of the police with that of government officials, you'll find it that it's actually very worrisome, because government under the international human rights system has the principal responsibility for the protection of rights. So the situation is that when we have clear-cut data like this, it helps us to put the focus where it is. I wonder why the solutions are being preferred with regards to giving human rights education to police. So you wonder what was their qualification in the first place, because in my own practice as a human rights lawyer, I found that the persons who are most responsible for the protection of human rights, indeed, not necessarily the Human Rights Commission, but the police, because you find that several infractions that are, or offenses that are committed against the human being, which are crimes that are reported to the police, are actually forms of human rights violation if the now if they go on if they go unreported, and if they go unprosecuted and unpunished. So the problem actually is the failure of the police, and then its positive decision, its positive character of violating rights, and then the failure of the Nigerian criminal justice system to bring to book those persons who commit offense in the character of human rights violations.
Are we seeing such failure here with the journalist Biniat, who's been in police custody since November 4th? Where does this discretion and the application of the law comes here?
A lot.
And the let me
a lot. The truth about it is that those in power, those who operate state power, are prone to violating human rights because they are, they are overtaken with the need to achieve certain things, and then they see any human being who holds a dissenting view as being in opposition, and so they often abuse the power of force, particularly that of the police. But there are provisions in our constitutions. Our constitution contemplates the violation of rights, so it defines them and also defines the process for actualizing those rights. What is worrisome in this particular case is that, this man should have his day in court. We're not saying that when you push for human rights, you then you take away the fact that there are criminal laws. When you offend Nigeria's criminal laws, you have your day in court. But you see, in Nigeria, the protection is that you cannot be unlawfully detained beyond 24 hours, and then beyond 48 hours if there is no court around the place of detention. So it's troublesome. Before I jump to conclusion, the expectation is that there are lawyers in Kaduna State. There are human rights NGOs in Kaduna State. There is an office of the National Human Rights Commission.
The Nigerian Union of Journalists is even there too.
We would have expected, before we come to the conclusion, whether the procedure for the fundamental rights enforcement has been actually activated with regards to this case. If not, it should be. But interestingly, those who violate human rights will also pay for it in terms of compensation and possibly be prosecuted.
But we hardly see that happen. Let's not forget too long ago the case of Senator Elijah Abu, who actually, went hard on a particular woman in a store here in Abuja. He's a working free man. He is still sitting in the Halo chamber. Let's not also forget the Code of Conduct Bureau chief. We saw him hit a security man with evidence, yet when reported, we hardly even see prosecution of such high-placed people.
The Senate has not even finished. He has never appeared before the Senate.
More than a year after, here we are.
There is always a distinction between offenses and human rights violations. The Nigerian state, through its law enforcement, has a responsibility to enforce human rights. And when there are violations, there are two categories of persons that can take action: the state itself and the person whose rights has been violated. So the question is, some of these persons actually negotiate and reach compromises with the persons who have violated their rights, but under criminal law. For example, in the case of the chairman of the Code of Conduct Tribunal, it doesn't matter how much settlement he reaches with the victim. The fact that he was seen captured on camera assaulting a Nigerian citizen, first and foremost, he should be prosecuted. He should have the opportunity of either being sent to jail or having an option of fine, so that the goal of criminal law will be achieved. That is, punish those persons who offend the standard of the law, so that those who are watching will see and then be deterred from doing the same thing.
Let's quickly ask you this. I'll take you back again to the NOI poll and the police or government officials, well, particularly the police. The kind of reform we're beginning to see in the police or by the government to, rejuvenate and regenerate the Nigeria police. So don't you think its recruitment system, admission into the various police colleges and the rest should be rejigged? Because some of these officers who bear arms are just crusade holders. So what deep or thorough knowledge of the Constitution, of rights issues, of, a lot of other issues to come up, would they really imbibe?
It's interesting to know that Nigerians are so much aware that 71%, according to the polls, 71% of Nigerians are actually aware of their own rights, and about 80% of Nigerians are actually aware that rights are often violated. But the most interesting part is that 27% of Nigerians believe that the police should be retrained and that they don't have the requisite human rights knowledge in order for them to actually be in law enforcement. But you see, there is something deeper than that in practice. You find that there is a deliberate policy that is unwritten and unspoken to recruit persons who can hardly be qualified to be in the police at a certain level, because at that level they are controllable. Because if you actually recruit persons that are intellectually sound and they are at that lower level of the police, they may think and often questions authority, question orders, and maybe superior orders in time. For example, it takes someone who doesn't know about human rights.
Is that a kind of colonial mentality?
There is a semblance and there is a connection with it, because you need to employ people in the police that are controllable. Go and die, they will go and die, according to Fela. Go and shoot, they will go and shoot. Go and quench, they will go and quench, in quote. So, but you see, what is being advocated is to recruit a crop of policemen that can now think, that can now reason, that will be able to stand up to his superior officer and say, this order is contrary to human rights, it's contrary to the police code of conduct, and we are not carrying it out. If you had such kind of policemen at Lekki Toll Gate, if you had such kind of soldiers at Lekki Toll Gate, irrespective of whatever the order was, they probably would not have shot at Nigeria.
Barrister Tietie, 80%, according to this polls, of Nigerians know their right and even know when it's been infringed on.
Particularly,
but if you go beyond that now, it tells you that most Nigerians will not report a right infringement because of the lack of trust in the system and the agent. So how do we go about building that trust so that way we can get more people reporting and seeing prosecution of those who infringe on our rights?
I must confess that I'm impressed with what the poll has brought up with. 30% of Nigerian adults actually reported cases of human rights violations.
How many prosecutions did we get?
Unfortunately, none. We may not because look at the category of persons according to the poll that they reported to. They either reported to the police that violated their own rights, that would not that will refuse to prosecute, or they go and report to NGOs or report to human rights organizations that lack the capacity. So it's a basic problem, and you find that it's interesting that the other 70% of Nigerians are the ones that you are actually worried about, because they seemingly have actually lost hope in the system. But you see, it becomes a challenge to the Nigerian, so institutions of human rights institutions in Nigeria. That is, we now have a situation where our people are aware. They are very much aware of what basic human rights are, whether they are civil or political rights, or economic, social, and cultural rights. Unfortunately, they look at their government as being not so responsible to their to enforcing human rights in Nigeria.
Knowing your right is one thing, but capitalizing on it is a different thing.
Absolutely. Thanks so very much.
Thank you.
Frank Tietie is a lawyer and a rights activist and a Rise News analyst.
Always my pleasure.
Thank you.